Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan O'Rourke. Hope your 2019 is going terrifically, and thanks for joining us. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you the audio portion of a webinar that I did for the International Council on Active Aging. And the title was, What Are the Current Trends and Future Possibilities in Technology? Now, you'll see in the show notes a link to where this can be found on my SlideShare account. I did this podcast, or actually webinar, in November of 2018. You might also find our episode with Colin Milner, which happened, I believe, back in October, November, on active aging, helpful as well. But the deck on SlideShare will give you the specific content with some of the videos as well. And, in this webinar, we talk about technology's impact in active aging. And, it's interesting. There is still a lot of biases concerning people who are aging and their use of tech. And, for example, the gap of tech adoption between people over the age of 65 versus millennials. And we talk about the fact that a lot of those myths are being dispelled. We kind of explore how a lot of trends are going to make tech even more relevant to active agers than most people might realize, and the tremendous business opportunities that exist in applying technologies with respect to this population, which is very affluent and will increasingly have a great bearing on how our well-being and betterment industries, which include fitness, continue to evolve. And we talk about things like interfaces, what's happening in the realm of interfaces, robotics, intelligence, all those things and buzzwords that you hear about, open source, for a lot of other marketplaces, and how those apply, in fact, even more relevantly to active aging. So I hope you enjoy this podcast and it gives you something to think about regarding the active aging marketplace. Again, if you're going to be at IRSA in March, we'll be there. I know that you'll have a lot of great education and keynotes to listen to, some of them touching on this market. And so I hope to see you there. So without further ado, please enjoy this webinar with the ICAA on technology and current trends and future possibilities for active aging. Thanks. Listen, everybody, it's a great honor to spend some time with you here today talking about this both intriguing and very changing environment that we all work in. I must say, Scott, that following you, I feel like Tiny Tim having followed the Beatles. It's humbling. You did a great job, Scott. Some of the things that we'll touch on in this slide will reflect some of Scott's commentary as well, and then append it and expand on it as well. So it was really good to hear your viewpoints. So in this opening slide, you might ask, well, why am I showing you a picture of a lady getting a tattoo while she looks at a smartphone? I think the reason is that, as I'm going to show you, my thesis is that we're going to look at technology trends, of course, but what those technology trends really represent is a complete shift in paradigm over how we work, how we age, how we live, how we educate each other, how we care for each other, how we have relationships, so many different things. And technology is becoming increasingly symbiotic with so many aspects of our lives. So those trends are going to try to be contextual. So I thought this image would be evocative in that sense. And I'd like to start with the notion of our mindsets surrounding technology as being something we really need to be paying attention to as we evaluate the implications of technology on this and any other industry. So I hope you enjoy this video. So I agree with Peter Diamandis that we have to change our view of the world from a linear view to an exponential view. And his book Abundance touches on this idea. And we're going to get into that in depth as we evaluate trends and their impact to our industry space and what they mean. Before I get into some of the specificity on that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on all the social channels at Bryan K. O'Rourke, and my email is there. So if there's anything about the presentation you want to discuss or following the presentation, or if you need further information, you can follow me on these different channels, and feel free to do so. Context is really important when we think about technology transformation and aging. And this is really essential because, as Scott pointed out, it's not all about the shiny new thing, the tech itself. It's understanding the context of how that tech is interweaving with other dynamics at play. And interesting when you see this picture here, which depicts an aging person in Japan, where the marketplace in Japan is probably the most advanced in adopting various new solutions and models with active aging in the world. It's instructive. And so what do I mean by that? Well, one example is these popular definitions in thinking, like the digital divide that Scott had mentioned a while ago. We remain and still have many biases about people and their lives, what their age means, what their thinking means, how they can contribute and live depending on their age. Great example is smartphone adoption, as I'll get into more when it comes to interface like voice and other things. The truth is that that divide between young people and people an older age is shrinking dramatically. So when we bring these biases about possibilities and solutions, we need to make sure, of course, that we're not getting in the way of possibilities in applying these various solutions in a thoughtful way. And as Scott mentioned, as I agree, technology's impact is just much greater than gadgets. It's so many things. Of course, the Apple Watch and its ecosystem is tremendous in its application and what it continues to do. But there's so much more when it comes to what organizations can do in technology adoption. We also have to manage this hype cycle, which is a great threat to organizations being realistic about what technologies are reliable, where they are in the kind of scope of adoption, and what they mean. And if you haven't seen the hype cycle before, produced by Gartner every year, innovation is started with ideas and technology, and then we move into what's called the peak of inflated expectations. And you can see where different technologies move through this trough of disillusionment into this kind of slope of enlightenment, and then that plateau of productivity. And so, as later I'll touch on augmented reality, right now we're in the trough of disillusionment. But AR and VR will become significant implications in their application in the next 24 to 48 months. And we'll see more and more of that to come. So like I say in this quote, any emerging tech is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. Nobody really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they are doing it. And that's true. So it's tough to imagine. We also have the unintended consequences, or the things that are technological that we don't always, they have these unforeseen outcomes that we don't even think about at the time. A great example of a technology that has had a massive impact on demography, on income, and other things is the controversy of the birth control pill, which was brought into wider use in the 60s. And it redefined how women could control their reproductive cycles and made different choices in their lives. This led to the rise of the dual household
dynamic for increased consumption in households as women entered the workforce increasingly. It led to the demographic shifts where they were having fewer children because they had more choices. The point is, in the end, technology, what it really, really does is it creates more and more choices, both in how we operate our businesses and how customers can do things, in the various choices we have for our careers, our lives, the way we take care of each other, and so many dynamics. And this is having wide implications in a variety of ways when we think about the future of what's happening today in the marketplace. And, as I said, lifestyle, age, income, how we work, etc. So the whole idea of generations in general are going away. And we really need to redefine how we think of generations and our mindsets around that because of what technology has done. So I hope you enjoyed this brief video to kind of bring some humor to this point. I believe he's right. Technologies are changing behavior. They're also changing expectation as people are now insisting on greater and greater convenience in everything they do. These are some of the new aspects of consumer expectation that you wouldn't even have thought possible 4 years ago. Streets in the air, that's one example. Augmented hearing, all these things are becoming real. The other thing we see is that we're reimagining stereotypes. When you look at the Instagram profiles of these ladies here, one being an 89-year-old grandmother and the other being a 72-year-old grandmother as well, who's a bodybuilder. Technology is completely redefining how generations are expressing themselves and interrelating. And overall, it's working, as I mentioned before, in a symbiotic fashion. So changes in demographics have been impacted by technology, as I pointed out. Technologies are being impacted by new technologies, as we'll get into. We just touched on customer expectation, big data, new business models. So there are all these dynamics that are working with technology to change the fabric of how we're doing everything. And this change in the symbiotic relationship pertains to 6 key drivers and patterns that are implicated by this: acceleration, reduction, convergence, cyclicality, redirection, and divergence. And I can't go into all these in detail, but you can look at this kind of Penelope and roadmap of the examples of the impact of technology with these other factors and what it means to various industries themselves. And what that requires of us to do before we get into these trends in greater detail is to really rethink our mindsets about the world we're operating in. We have to challenge our assumptions because right now, the greatest products and services in active aging have not been invented yet. And in the next 60 months, what we will see compared to the last 60 months will be a great change, a great advancement. So we need to rethink our operating models. We need to start thinking about the new Benjamin Button economy as well, where service delivery becomes more valuable over time as people obtain more and more data and as organizations understand how to change their operating models in a much more rapid way of doing things to make them more and more successful. And it truly is the mother of all business and innovation opportunities. And we will see this, reveal itself and continue to reveal itself in the coming years. As you see Ernst & Young asking the question, how can we disrupt aging before aging disrupts economic growth? So all the minds and great minds and business entrepreneurs, they're all focusing on this. And as I mentioned before, it's just a redefinition of so many presumptions. Recently in Harvard Business Review, they had this great article about when no one retires. The notion that people will work well into their 80s and beyond and be able to do that is going to be a real thing that we're going to see continue. We're also going to see the natural aspect of cross-generational synthesis in all the things we do, from education, care, pretty much anything that we'd be considering when it comes to business models and delivery of any product or service. So I really feel that requires us to reimagine everything that we're doing today in any organization you work with and for your career and life. And when we look through the lens of active aging, we make sure that we are using this kind of new viewpoint and thinking as we evaluate questions like, how are we going to deliver product and service? Why? What does the customer truly want? How can we deliver on those things? We have to move forward with a blank canvas when we consider these things, because the possibilities are so great today. So now I'd like to touch on 6 drivers with some examples surrounding this tech. Some of them are in the background that we don't think about. However, their implications are just getting started. Cloud computing being one. It's amazing the number of small and mid-sized enterprises that still don't rely largely on cloud computing software as a service solutions. And so the growth in that marketplace and the solutions touching cloud computing are a significant driver of the future. And we're seeing the result of that express itself in many, many, many different ways today. As this graph for high-tech trends touch upon, cloud computing is the number 2 area of growth and expansion and development in its tools. And, I could show you many, many examples. Obviously, the mobile applications with Apple Health and connecting the different health systems that are now part of medical records, working with many dozens of solutions. Without the cloud, we couldn't do this. And so any organization today that thinks about digitizing their offering, you're going to have to go forward with cloud solutions. There's no other way. Of course, there are challenges with this that we'll talk about. But in evaluating, your delivery to the active aging marketplace or any marketplace, you've got to focus on these 5 aspects of competitive ability. And you're not going to be able to do that unless you're a gigantic organization, and there are only a few of those, without taking into account these 5 dynamics. And it's hyper-personalization, easy, frictionless, convenient commerce, facilitated commerce, being highly strategic in your efforts, and then also delivering all service via omni-channel models. The cloud is an absolute necessity to be able to execute on these things, along with some other key dynamics, which the cloud is a part. And I'll touch on these. Automation, enterprise cloud solutions where data is in the cloud and able to be exchanged in ways that are able to create these experiences I alluded to. Sensors and data, which we'll get into next. And finally, of course, human capital. Great people. So these are the necessary engines to drive the new era business models that will address active aging and more. Now let's touch a little bit on sensors and data. The Internet of Things, as it's commonly known, is really this holos, as Kevin Kelly called it, of collections of data through sensors and connecting them via the cloud. And from that, deriving information and applying different machine learning and AI as well to create value and solutions any place, anytime, anywhere in our mobile culture. And IoT is a gigantic opportunity that is at the core of the evolution of active aging, healthcare, and so many other industries today. The growth in IoT means that there'll be over 50 billion connected devices. We see that through our Amazon Echoes, through our living rooms that are connected to those Echoes with the light bulbs, to Ring and access to our homes remotely, to some of the solutions Scott was referring to, and I'll get into more in active aging. This is going to be center of the plate when it comes to how we're going to deliver on the things I alluded to and be successful, and doing it at lower rates of cost and higher effectiveness. And, really, when we hear some of these terms and we look at the hype cycle, as I showed before, there's a lot of mislabeling. And when we think about things, we need to be careful of our biases as well. So, for example, social media, which just is another word or two words for how we use the internet today. The same is true with wearables, which are really just sensor devices that are being used in different ways. And we're going to see a plethora of sensor devices being applied in just infinite numbers of ways to create more and more data that will drive the IoT to gain deeper and deeper insight and ultimately create those Benjamin Button models, where as our organizations collect more and more data and understand more and more about outcomes, it can get better and better and better at doing what needs to be done and having deeper understanding. So IoT is just a mammoth opportunity area that we'll see creating this convenience in just multiple ways. And we see that even as you've seen, if you're going to buy an Audi today, to give you an idea of the expansive nature of IoT, that data from one Audi A8, which is able to conduct a high degree of autonomous driving today, you can buy it commercially. It is the equivalent of what 2,500 internet users require in the essence of how it taps into the cloud and how it uses processors. But this technology is here. So its applications, as I showed you before, when it comes to tech, the implications of that are just profound. In fact, they're beyond many people's ability to grasp what it means because it is so profound. And it has, direct benefits to people in active aging. The idea of driving itself is going to be eliminated as a challenge. Transportation and how we can get around without having to drive per se is a real thing today. And we see other business models emerging to even deal with other hyper-personalized marketplaces where if somebody doesn't have a smartphone, they now have Go Grandpa that actually enables you to have what they need delivered to them anyway. So it's just a plethora of these solutions that will rely on IoT. And what is really essential when it comes to IoT as well is the need for standards, the need for us as we connect more and more devices to make that a more and more economical paradigm for users is working on standardizations so that we can deliver these things more and more effectively. The European Active Age Project is a great example of that, and I'd like to share a brief video with you that explains what that initiative is and what it means. So now that we went through IoT, let's talk about interface. So as many people will know, interface in the notion of how we use devices with having to have a certain eyesight, the ability to have dexterity, et cetera, it's a big deal. And what we're going to see is technology is going to become more and more like the air we breathe. The increasing alternative types of user interface and user experience through gesture, facial recognition, voice, this is very, very real. And I'm going to show you a very quick example of how even neuroconnectivity to interface is here today. And we will see this become a big thing to where via a number of ways, we'll just have to think about what we want to have happen. So voice, gesture, facial, all this is now a real part of making interface easier and easier for people of age or anyone for that matter. We don't have time to go through the whole demo, but I think you get the idea. I talked about facial recognition, access control, even facial recognition to determine a person's state of mind. Apps are coming out that are doing that as well. Then we have virtual reality, which is a significant dynamic from a standpoint of so many things. Education. There's actually a firm in San Francisco that can put sensors on you to hold your child that's just been born, to take in all the data to later recreate that experience. It's just breaking down the walls for human experience in a completely immersed way. Oculus is releasing a new product, and I think it has just in the last week or two, that will provide 3 degrees of freedom, and it is not tethered to a computer. We will see the virtual reality and augmented reality marketplace expand significantly. I would say that AR and VR is right now about where the internet was for the user in 1996, 97. And its implications of what it will mean for people and in so many ways are not even fully understood yet, but it is going to be a real thing. Augmented reality as well, which is layering digital over the physical space, a gigantic marketplace as we just went through. These are just all new types of interface where data and experience can be transmitted to a user and back more and more effectively. And we're even seeing this in so many markets, even the fitness marketplace with these products coming out that are starting to increasingly deploy these things with gamification, education, and other solutions. Of course, Scott touched on voice, which came out of nowhere. Over 3 years ago, I wrote about voice before people knew voice was going to be a real thing. Amazon came out with Echo, and now you have so many competing products. Voice interface is just gigantic in its implications. The reasons that people use them are varied. Of course, the skills that come with these products are significant. Voices is being introduced into all types of devices. And, in our computers, in our devices, in our homes, our Echoes, our cars. And we've seen just a tremendous amount of growth in a few years. I think what if anything, what this does is illustrate how the rapidness of adoption of new tools is gone up so much. When you look at a stat like that, from 7% to 75% penetration of U.S. households that quickly. That is amazing how fast this has come. And I'm just blown away by this, some of these statistics. And we're not stopping because as AI gets better, as we'll touch on in a minute, there's more contextualization, more learning and understanding, more and more and more solutions will be delivered that enables anybody to be able to connect to the internet for a variety of purposes that create great user experiences and new business models. And we can see some of these other Alexa skills by category, what people are doing. I mean, the fact that we can buy our dogs treats automatically via voice is just kind of bizarre. The fact that you can order a vehicle through Uber using your voice on Echo. The fact that I can ask my device in the morning what my calendar is for the day. And it's so seamless. More and more this interface dynamic, which I think is a huge area of growth and opportunity to make technology more consumable. It's just amazing how much this is going to make tech increasingly like the air we breathe. It's there. We'd know it if it wasn't there, but we just use it and we rely on it increasingly. Now let's look at artificial intelligence, which has just enormous implications to how we do so many things. Now, this is very small, and I apologize for that, but when we look at adoption and the number of companies that have entered this market, when we talk about agents, enterprises, platforms, industries, etc., it is just a massive area of growth. Every aspect of how we interface with clients, whatever it is that you are seeking in your business, interfaces, intelligence, platforms, all these things are going to combine to meet those 5 dynamics of user experience that are so critical. And we see many examples of these applications now. MSGAI, intelligent engagement for any company or service. We even have products that are psychologists, like the Wobot, providing mental health services and personalized motivation and emotional support. The Department of Defense deployed AIs in treating post-traumatic stress disorder. And the truth is their performance they outperformed human therapists. for very good reasons. Humans tended to be much more transparent about their emotion when they are dealing with the AI versus another human being, if you can believe it, but it's true. So the implications are just gigantic. We see AI with Noom, of course. Many of you are familiar with Noom and the CDC and reimbursements models and what AI is doing with Noom to combine human intervention with intelligence, machine learning, and data collection. These products and services are going to be significant. Then we look at the whole era of medicine itself and what AI is doing in new business models, like this in silico medicine, which is using AI for drug discovery, biomarker development, and new ways of thinking about interjecting and extending lifetimes, and quality of life. These are real solutions. Let me share this quick video with you to illustrate the massive opportunity in treatment and medicine and what is happening today using AI. So when I told you that the greatest products and services haven't been invented yet, hopefully that gave a little support behind what I was mentioning, because the hyper-personalization of aging and treatment around disease is completely going to be revolutionized in a matter of the next decade or less. So let's go on our final point, which is robotics, and I'll try to wrap this up in the next few minutes, and so we can enter in some questions. Robotics, another gigantically growing field, 20% year-over-year growth for the foreseeable future. And there's so many different ways. When I showed you the 4 operating engines behind successful organizations today, and I talked about, of course, cloud platforms, enterprise platforms, sensors and data, human capital. The other thing is automation. And as we can see here, the robotics market has grown faster than people have even expected. And the number of products that are now coming out into the market is pretty significant. In the next 48 months, you're going to see a plethora of humanoid-type robotic solutions for in-home care and other organizations, and delivered in a variety of different ways, and that will only increase. You're probably familiar with Elic, which is one. There are many others. SoftBank's product Pepper. If you go to San Francisco and several hotels, Pepper is deployed and is actually taking care of guests. And, just like Scott had mentioned about the digital divide, let me tell you, this is a real thing that's going to transform service models across many industries, and active aging is no exception. And as I mentioned, many examples, Jibbo, there are many others that incorporate this AI, this interface, these different aspects of tech in a mobile product that is able to do so much more, assist with moving people, assist with so many different things, deploying medications, just so many different applications. So I think robotics is the other massive mega trend that will impact this industry and so many more. So in wrapping up, the question that people will always ask, and what Scott touched on in the end, is what should you do? Obviously, looking at any business model today in any industry, you need to start exploring S-curve reinvention. I won't go into this in huge amount of detail, but it starts with understanding what business model you're trying to execute around, what the values and belief systems of your stakeholders and participants are, and to start finding hacks in what you're doing and start experimentation around those hacks to figure out how you can make an impact that is real. To Scott's point, tech for the sake of tech is a bad thing. It has to be done in context around meeting your customer. And that's the next thing, is really understanding your customer journey. The great question that was brought up about assessing technologies, real world application is understanding context. And that takes homework. It takes understanding. It takes really knowing what's going on in your model today. What are the value and expectations and paradigms for your users, and how you can re-engineer your process to improve satisfaction, improve outcome, and use tools to achieve that. Another big thing is understanding these trends. Looking through the right lens is so important because it's easy to be assuaged to something that isn't really what it seems. So attending these kind of events, reading, staying up to date, understanding what these mega trends are and the components is critical. And another point I mentioned earlier is having a strategic mindset about this. Shifting the organization, shifting your thinking, profit to purpose, hierarchies to network, privacy to transparency, planning to experimentation, controlling to empowerment, and then predicting to the unpredictable. This is critical, is the mindset in today's era. Some of the resources I would recommend you consider getting. And if you tweet me at Bryan K. O'Rourke and tell me you want this and follow me, I'll DM you. I will get anyone on this call one of these books. So that's Kevin Kelly's The Inevitable, fantastic. And then The End of Competitive Advantage by Rita McGrath. Really a fresh way to look at how you're conducting strategy in your organization and to rethink some things that everyone needs to be spending time on. We produce a regular podcast called the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. This is a free resource. I really would encourage you to take a chance and listen to some of the episodes. Colin Milner was on one recently, fantastic, with the ICAA. We've done over 75 episodes in the last year and a half. And it's a great thing to do when you're on a treadmill or taking a walk or doing whatever, is to continue to educate yourself on key trends. And then the other thing is realizing that technology is but a tool. So I want to leave you with this brief video, and then we'll move to questioning. So hold on a minute and watch. So again, as I mentioned, what an honor it was to be on the presentation today. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you to the ICAA for the opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me. There's my email. You can reach out to me on any of those social channels. Tweet me and talk about the ICAA and tell me what book you like, and I'll get you a digital copy of it. And without further ado, again, thank you so much. I hope you found the presentation interesting and informative. Hi, everyone. This is Bryan O'Rourke again. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. The podcast is brought to you by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, as well as my company, Videri Ventures, Moon Mission Media, and others. We hope you enjoyed the content. Please feel free to share it and join us again soon when we bring to you another leader in the fitness space talking about technology and what it means to our industry. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again very soon.